Hello, gentlemen. Environmental science. We're continue on with our final section of plants, leaves. We're going to move on to leaf functions. One of the things that we need to talk about mostly about what leaves are there for. Obviously, we've talked about quite a bit. How does water get to the leaf? We talked about the pressure flow model, which of course talked about sugars or carbohydrates being made in the leaf, being transported to the phloem. Xylem would then pump in water, and then of course that solution would pump down into the stem, and the sugars would be stored there, and then be pumped into the sink. So what we're concerned about now is the source, and of course the source is the leaf. The leaves are the primary site of photosynthesis for the plants. Now the rest of the plant is also green, so obviously it does maximize what it has there. It will create a photosynthetic process wherever it can. The leaves are the main where photosynthesis occurs. Remember that photosynthesis is, generally speaking, the use of light energy to get enough energy to take carbon dioxide in what's known as the Calvin cycle and create carbon dioxide. Well, the plant can do that self-sufficiently by taking light and creating a electron transport chain. Essentially, from the breakdown of water, it gets electrons. With the light, it can get those electrons to move, and it will create some other chemicals such as NADPH and ATP process that will, that's known as the light reactions, will create those chemicals, and then those will go into the Calvin cycle, which will create the glucose that we know. And eventually, of course, that will go into the phloem, and then the xylem pumps in the water, and it goes down to the stem, so on and so forth. Okay, but those happen in the mesophyll cells, okay, specifically in the palisade mesophyll. Now, the light energy is also used by the mesophyll cells to synthesize some amino acids, and of course a variety of other organic molecules that the plant would need, some other enzymes, of course. But that light energy, main purpose, of course, is photosynthesis. A major limitation to plant photosynthesis, of course, is insufficient water due to transpiration. Remember, we talked about 98% of that plant is going to, 98% of the water the plant's going to lose. So, however, transpiration may also benefit the plant because as it keeps that water moving, it'll keep the molecules, it'll take some energy with it, and it may cool the plant. And it, of course, it speeds up the transportation of minerals through the xylem. Another good thing. Modifications for capturing light. This is probably where we're going to get into some more evolutionary type things, but what plants can do to, of course, help themselves. So leaves absorb light, which in turn provides the energy for photosynthesis, like we talked about, the light reactions, and then moving into the Calvin cycle. The leaves of some plant species may have adapted to their environment by maximizing light interception. So for corn plants, since we plant them in such a way, they want to be a nice broad, thin leaf so that they are getting as much sunlight as possible on their leaf. So when you look at a corn leaf, it's not uber thick type of leaf, but it actually is rather thin for where it needs to be. But it's a leaf that, of course, is adapted to maximize as much light because it's been bred to be planted as close together so we can get as many corn plants as possible, but we still want a plant that maximizes that light capturing. So in dry environments, plants have often receive more light and then they can use, so we're talking about like desert plants. The structures have evolved in these plants that reduce the amount of light that's absorbed, so they often have little hairs on their plant. And of course, you read this in the reading for today. The other leaf functions that we need to be concerned about, of course, are gas exchanges. Plants may balance their need to open their stomata to receive carbon dioxide, which they have to do. They have to release the oxygen byproduct and have to take in the carbon dioxide, and their need for their stomata to prevent water loss. Because remember, when their stomata are open, they lose water as well as oxygen, but they also bring in carbon dioxide at the same time. So they have to kind of balance that. So a stoma is bordered by two kidney-shaped guard cells, and these guard cells are modified cells on the leaf epidermis that regulate the gas and water exchange. Now, there's a process for the guard cells that can open and close. Pretty straightforward. The opening and closing of the stoma is regulated by the amount of water in those guard cells. So when the epidermal cells of the leaf pump potassium ions, again, active transport, into the guard cells, water moves into the guard cells by osmosis. So we're going to pump potassium into the guard cell. Water by osmosis, then always moving to the area of higher osmotic pressure, will move towards that potassium. So they'll move into the guard cells. And this will cause them to bow apart and form a pore. During darkness, of course, potassium ions are taken out of those guard cells. Therefore, the water is released out of there, and this causes the guard cells to shrink slightly, and this closes the pore. Stomata also close if water is scarce. This, of course, helps with the idea of transpiration. If the opening's closed, we don't get any loss of water. Unfortunately, we also don't get any exchange of carbon dioxide. So the plant has to kind of balance out, do I need some carbon dioxide now for the Calvin cycle, or do I not? And so it can kind of open and close when it needs to. And of course, like it says here, the closing of the stomata greatly reduces further water loss, but may also prevent the plant from dying. So it will help them survive until the next rain. Okay, so here's the idea of what guard cells and stomata. So the stomata is the entire structure, this opening here, this pore. This would be an open stomata. This would be a closed stomata. These are the kidney-shaped guard cells. Again, if we want the guard cells to open, we pump in potassium. We fill it with water, and they swell and they open. And if we want them to close, we pump out the potassium back into the outer epidermal cells, and the water will follow, therefore closing the pore as it shrinks. Okay. So again, here's another good picture of what's going on as far as the guard cells. If we pump in water, it swells, therefore we have a little bit of an opening. When we pump out that the potassium, the water will flow with it because of osmosis, and it will close. Okay. All right, that ends our talk. Thank you very much. You guys have been a great audience.